My name is Daniel Mercer, and I've walked into infernos that roared like freight trains. I've carried men out of smoke so thick it tasted like metal. But nothing, ever hit me the way it did that Tuesday morning, standing barefoot in my kitchen with the smell of burnt coffee lingering in the air, trying to fix my granddaughter's glitchy tablet. A few crayons were scattered across the counter, bright little reminders of innocence, when the tablet froze again. I tapped the wrong icon. The mail app opened. Annoyed, I moved to close it until a subject line caught my eye. Guardianship strategy, urgent, for dad. At first, I thought it was junk, some legal advertisement. But then I saw the senders. Lydia, my methodical oldest daughter. Mark, her husband, whose construction business had been wobbling the past year. Evan, my younger son, whose tone lately had felt less like checking in and more like taking inventory. And someone I didn't know. C. Hollister, Elder Care's senior advisor. A pulse of cold slid under my ribs. I tapped the thread. Lydia, we need to move forward, Hollister said. Earlier incident at Pineview MKT proves instability. Don't forget stove thing. I blinked. Hard. Pineview Market? Stove thing? Neither happened. I scrolled. Mark, we gotta build a consistent picture. The more examples, the better. The thing we talked ABT last week. Use that too. A typo. Rushed phrasing. God, that made it feel real. I kept reading. Evan, if we don't act soon, everything Dad owns will be drained by property taxes plus medical what-ifs. Better to redirect assets now. Redirect. Assets. Now. My throat tightened. I scrolled further. Lydia, Hollister can run a simplified competency eval. But we need Dad a bit off balance that day. Just play along. My hands started to shake, not with age, not with decline, but with a clarity so sharp it hurt. 66 wasn't young, but it sure as hell wasn't memory care age. My last medical checkup, including cognitive screening, had been excellent for a man your age. I still lifted weights, still volunteered at the fire academy, still drove without GPS because I knew every back road in Brookhaven Ridge. And yet here were my children, plotting a narrative about me like accountants preparing a fraud report. Then came the email that felt like a nail through the floorboards. Mark, guardianship lets us manage his properties plus streamline the estate. If we transition him early into care, he won't fight the changes. Transition me into care. Like moving furniture. I felt the room grow quieter, denser. Even the wind outside seemed to pause at the window. A single flicker of doubt crossed my mind. Did I forget something? Misplace something? I replayed the past month. Every grocery run. Every morning routine. Every fire safety session I'd taught at the academy. Nothing was missing. Nothing was foggy. They weren't documenting decline. They were fabricating it. I scrolled to the final message. Lydia, 2 weeks. Intervention style. Keep Dad cooperative until then. Intervention style. As if I were a problem to be contained. That was when the betrayal finally registered. Not loud, but slow and deliberate, like the deep groan of a structure about to collapse. I thought back to Lydia's wellness checks that felt more like audits. Evan reviewing my monthly bills as if rehearsing for a deposition. Mark hugging me last weekend with questions about whether I'd updated my will recently. They hadn't been circling out of love. They had been circling like wolves. I set the tablet down gently, as if any sudden movement might make the world tilt even further. The burnt coffee smell mixed with something else now, adrenaline warming in my chest. And then instinct returned. Not panic, not rage. Procedure. My breathing slowed the same way it used to right before we breached a burning doorway. My mind shifted into steps. Document, verify, secure witnesses, anchor the truth before lies could calcify. They think I'm vulnerable, I whispered to the empty kitchen. They think I'm alone. But I wasn't. I had decades of colleagues who respected me, neighbors who saw me daily, academy instructors who knew my routines, community leaders who trusted my judgment. I had a reputation that couldn't be erased by a few fraudulent emails. If they wanted a narrative war, they'd chosen the wrong man. I picked up the tablet again, reread the thread once more, and felt my resolve harden like steel cooling into shape. They've built a strategy, I murmured. A slow breath. Steady. Controlled. Let's show them mine. For a full minute after reading that email thread, I couldn't trust my own body. My hand shook as I reached for my mug, and when I brought the coffee to my lips, I missed by half an inch. Some part of me, an ashamed, frightened part. Wondered if maybe that was what they were counting on. A stumble here, a forgotten detail there, a moment of doubt they could twist into evidence. But then a memory cut through the fog. Lydia at 6 years old, running into my arms after falling off her bike. I'd carried her home, cleaned the scrape, and promised, "I'll always be the one protecting you." Now here I was, steadying myself against a countertop while she plotted to put me away. I set the mug down and looked around the house. The early morning light pressed against the curtains, making them sway slightly, and for the first time in 20 years, I didn't like how it looked. As if someone was just outside, watching for signs of weakness. I drew the curtains closed. Then I reached for my old academy notebook. It wasn't just paper. It was the spine of who I used to be. Incident reports, drill schedules, evacuation logs. Whenever chaos hit the fan, the notebook was where clarity started. Today was no different. I wrote at the top, "Truth Report, D. Mercer," and I began listing facts. Real ones. My handwriting firmed with each line. Midway down the page, my breath steadied. The simple act of documenting, of reclaiming the narrative, brought back an old muscle memory. The feeling right before we entered a burning structure, when adrenaline sharpened everything instead of clouding it. But even with that clarity, something in my chest cracked a little. Because none of this should have been necessary. Still, I had work to do. I dialed Captain Miguel Ruiz, the man who trained half the firefighters in the county. He answered with a laugh. "Mercer, don't tell me you're calling at dawn because you finally learned to cook." "I need to ask you something serious," I said. My voice betrayed me. It wavered on the word serious. The laughter died instantly. "What's wrong?" I hesitated, afraid, for a half second, that he might say something that matched my children's narrative. "Have you ever noticed anything off about me? Judgment? Recall anything at all?" Ruiz scoffed. "Daniel, I once watched you run half a block to stop a rookie from connecting a hose backward. Your mind's sharper than the drill tower ladder." I didn't realize how badly I needed to hear that until relief hit me like a warm draft. "I might need an official statement," I said. Ruiz's tone shifted from friend to commander. "You'll have it today. And Daniel, whatever's happening, you won't face it alone." Next was Dr. Samuel Farley. When he picked up, I asked for my full medical records and a cognitive evaluation summary. There was a pause. "That's a significant request, Daniel. Has someone challenged your competency?" I didn't want to tell him everything. Not yet. "Someone is preparing to." Another pause. "I'll get your file. But listen carefully. Once you start requesting baseline cognitive documentation, it signals a legal dispute. Are you prepared for that scrutiny?" A cold ripple ran through me. I am now. I wasn't before. But I was now. "You can pick everything up today," he said. "And Daniel, your last exam showed zero cognitive concerns." Another written anchor to truth. Finally, I called Tom Bennett, retired detective, specialist in elder fraud. He answered with a grunt. "If this isn't about fishing or bourbon, you're interrupting my peace." "It's serious," I said. When I finished explaining, he let out a long breath. "Daniel, this is textbook. Same lies, same invented incidents, same expert evaluator. Half the guardianship courts in this state accept these cases with 2 flimsy affidavits and a sympathetic story." A chill crawled across my shoulders. So what do? You build a paper shield thicker than their lies. Documentation, timestamps, witnesses. Once they file, you're guilty until proven competent, understand? The words hit harder than they should have. "Can you help me? I'll meet you Thursday." And Daniel, time is not on their side anymore. After the calls, I stood in the silence of my living room. Usually the quiet soothed me. This morning it felt like the low hum before an alarm bell, heat building under the surface. I took a slow breath, the same steadying technique we used before forcing open a burning doorway. This wouldn't consume me. It would illuminate them. Just as I closed my notebook, my phone buzzed. A message from Lydia. "Morning, Dad. Just checking in. How are you feeling today? Red heart." A normal text. Affectionate, even. Except now it read like reconnaissance. A temperature check. A probe. And beneath the heart emoji, the faint outline of the trap. I set the phone down carefully. They thought they were moving pieces on a board. They forgot I built half the damn board myself. By the time I left Dr. Farley's office, my nerves were buzzing under my skin like static. I walked toward my truck, fishing in my pocket for the keys, and for the first time in my life, my fingers fumbled. The key slipped, clattered onto the pavement, and rolled under the fender. I froze, not because I couldn't reach it, but because for half a second, the slip felt like exactly the kind of moment my children were banking on. A stumble they could twist into evidence. I crouched, retrieved it, and told myself it was stress. Not decline. Stress. Even so, when I straightened, I scanned the parking lot automatically. A silver SUV idled 2 rows over. The windows were tinted, but I could make out the faint glow of a phone screen inside. The silhouette shifted, not dramatically, just a slight lean, as though someone was adjusting their view. As I stepped into my truck, the SUV rolled forward slowly. Not enough to be strange to anyone else, but enough that my instincts tightened. A car doesn't idle that long without purpose. I forced myself to drive away normally, but the old firefighting alertness had kicked on inside me. The same inner pressure I felt when a structure groaned before collapse. When I got home, the landline blinked with 2 new messages. I hit play. First, Evan. His voice was too light, too careful. Hey, Dad. Just checking in. You around tonight? Maybe swing by. Thought it'd be good to, talk. He repeated the same phrase Lydia had used the week before. Just checking in. Not casual. Not organic. Coordinated. Then the second message. Lydia. Hi, Dad. I was thinking, since you're usually home on Tuesdays, maybe dinner this Friday? We really want to spend time with you. Mark will cook. The problem? I hadn't told anyone my schedule. Not recently. Yet she assumed it with eerie confidence. I deleted neither message. Evidence comes in many small, soft forms. But the real danger wasn't in what they said, it was in what they didn't. They were tightening timing, closing the window, setting the stage. Later that afternoon, I drove to the fire academy to meet Captain Ruiz. Diesel fumes drifted from the bay as the crew ran drills, and for a moment, the familiarity eased the pressure gripping my chest. Ruiz handed me the letter he'd written, a thick, detailed account of my reliability, decision-making, and volunteer leadership. Hell, Daniel, he muttered. Half this department learned their discipline from you. If someone's questioning your mind, the problem isn't you. I thanked him. But before I could say more, a movement caught my eye. A dark sedan crawled past the open bay doors. The driver didn't wave, didn't ask for directions. Instead, the silhouette of a woman leaned forward slightly, clipboard propped on her steering wheel. Her head turned just enough for me to see the neat curve of a bob haircut. Then she drove on, the sedan disappearing before anyone else noticed. But something primal in me surged, that subtle tightening in the chest before a fire flashed over, the instinctive recognition of threat. Ruiz followed my gaze. She looking for someone? Maybe, I said. But I already knew. Something in the bones knows a predator's outline. Back home, I ran the plate through a public registry. Hollister Consulting, LLC. She wasn't just scouting. She was doing a pre-assessment check, observing whether I was still independent, mentally present, socially supported. Evaluators like her didn't just test. They constructed narratives. She was gathering raw material. That evening, I spread everything across my kitchen table. Farley's medical summary, Ruiz's affidavit, academy schedules, emergency drill logs, volunteer records, and the emails. I hesitated before printing them, my thumb lingering on the mouse. The words still hit like punches, but I printed them twice without realizing it, a quiet tremor of fear or anger I couldn't name. I placed one set in the binder. The second I left on the table, staring at my name typed by my own daughter's hand. Every tab I added became sharper, more precise. Too precise. A lifetime of controlling crisis compressed into organizing plastic dividers and paper edges. This wasn't preparation. It was armor. Just as I closed the binder, my phone buzzed. Lydia, Dad, can you confirm Friday? It's really important. Red heart. Important. Not urgent. Not casual. Important. I typed. Yes. Stopped. Deleted it. Typed. I'll let you know. Deleted again. Finally, I sent. We'll talk Friday. I watched the screen. Message delivered. No typing bubble. No reply. Maybe she was sitting with Hollister right now. Maybe the text was part of the file. I set the phone down slowly, as if it might detonate. Outside, a sound drifted in. A car door closing somewhere down the block. Soft. Ordinary. But it stiffened my spine all the same. They were getting closer. And Friday wasn't a dinner invitation. It was the ignition point. I woke Wednesday to a house that no longer felt like a sanctuary. Same scuffed floorboard, Same dent in the hallway where Evan rammed his truck at 4. But the air sat differently, taut, as if someone had strung a wire through the rooms and was waiting to pluck it. I made coffee the way I always did. 2 scoops leveled with a knife, water to line 3, but when I reached for the mug my hand hesitated and my fingers closed on the rim too hard. The cup slipped an inch and clinked against the counter. It was nothing. It was everything. The small misstep tasted like the things they were accusing me of. Little lapses, little proof points. I breathed, cleaned the spill, and told myself aloud, not decline. Stress. Later, folding a towel, I had another lapse, a flash of blankness so brief I almost laughed at myself. I had to stand there and force the thought back. Why did I come into this room? Then, as if to prove I still could, I remembered. I'd left the towel on the chair for Thursday's meeting with Chun. The second regained memory steadied me. The moment made me strange company to my own mind. I sat at the kitchen table and opened the binder again. Under Truth Report I added, Wednesday, hold normal externally. Solidify allies. Document. Do not react. Writing it felt like knotting a rope before a climb. The notebook was my incident report, my muscle memory. Putting facts on paper trimmed the room's edges into something I could handle. Around noon my phone chirped with a text from an unknown number. Mr. Mercer, this is Colleen Hollister. I'll be conducting a routine wellness interview. Your children have expressed concerns. Please confirm availability. The clinical distance of it landed like a scalpel. Her wording echoed lines from the email thread. Routine, concerns, wellness. A deliberate mimicry of caring phrasing designed to disorient. Vague. Pressure. I typed back, fingers steadier than I felt. Schedule through my attorney. No interview without counsel. 3 dots appeared. Then they vanished. Hollister had seen my refusal and paused to decide the next move. That small hesitation, professional, measured, felt worse than immediate aggression. It was manipulation with manners. At 2:15 my phone lit again. 2 texts within 90 seconds. Lydia. Dad, did you see my message? Friday still good? Really hope so. Evan. Yep. Lydia said she texted. Just checking in. You okay for Friday? Same phrasing. Same soft punctuation. The uncanny echo made my skin crawl. A rehearsal. A choreography I wasn't part of. Later a voicemail from Mark arrived. I listened, and 2 things set my teeth on edge. He said my first name, then laughed, too bright, as if to sell warmth, and used buddy twice, like a radio host easing an audience. Daniel, buddy. Fridays are good, family night, right? We'll make it easy. Don't worry. The chuckle at the end landed like an afterthought, like a cue in a play. I drove to the academy to pick up Ruiz's letter. The bay doors yawned open, diesel and hot metal scent rolling out. Ruiz gave me the affidavit, detailed, blunt, unvarnished. If someone's saying your judgment's off, they're lying or blind, he said. He looked at me with that flat, assessing stare officers use when they weigh a man's reliability. As we spoke, a dark sedan eased past the bay, slow enough to be conspicuous. The driver's silhouette leaned forward, a phone screen glowed. For a heartbeat, I felt watched from behind as well as from the street. The vent fan scraping louder than usual, an impossible amplification of normal sounds that tightened my chest. Not paranoia. Threat reading. My training tuned me to those microscreams. Later, when I traced the plate, Hollister Consulting LLC came up. She wasn't randomly driving by. She was observing, checking if I was home, noting how I moved, whether help dropped by. Evaluators don't just test, they gather ambience. They collect witnesses, or note their absence. That evening I laid out my materials across the kitchen table. Ruiz's affidavit, Farley's summary, drill logs, academy rosters, emergency callouts, and the emails. I printed the thread twice and didn't notice until my hands paused over the second stack. I realized I'd printed duplicates because my hands had moved on autopilot, like a surgeon repeating a suture until it felt right. I arranged tabs with meticulousness that felt borderline obsessive, an overcorrection for the vulnerability I'd tasted all day. Before bed, I rehearsed a line aloud in the dark. I will not consent to any evaluation without counsel present. And hated how uncertain it sounded when it left my mouth. I checked my calendar twice. I imagined how Lydia would interpret that voice. Defensive, fragile, guilty. The thought tightened my jaw. Outside, a gust rattled the gutter on the west side of the house. The metallic knock sounded like a cautious hand testing a door. The sound, small and ordinary, felt symbolic. The wind at the western edge where storms gather. The house seemed to brace with me. My phone buzzed. Lydia. Thanks, Dad. Means a lot you're coming. We'll make it easy for you. Easy, she wrote. The word was a challenge wrapped in a smile. I set the phone down gently, fingers lingering over the binder's clasp, and breathed in through my nose. I'd seen enough scripts in my life to recognize one. They pinned a version of me for the record. I'd been thrust into their narrative. I would show up with my own. Let them write their scene, I whispered. I've got a script they won't expect. Thursday morning felt wrong before I even opened my eyes. Not dangerous, just misaligned. I pulled on a shirt and didn't notice until I reached the kitchen that the second button was slipped into the third hole, tugging the hem slightly sideways. It wasn't confusion. It was the kind of distraction that happens when your mind is 3 miles ahead of your body. Still, the sight of it made something cold nip at the back of my skull. I rebut-toned the shirt, poured water into the coffee maker, and filled it past the line before catching myself. Again, not forgetfulness. Preoccupation. But I could almost hear Lydia. Dad's been scattered lately. That thought stung more than the mistake itself. As I reached for my reading glasses, the counter was empty. I checked by the sink, the table, the pocket of my jacket. Nowhere. A hot flush crawled through my chest. This is exactly the sort of moment they'd use. Then I felt the weight in my shirt pocket. Found, not forgotten. Shame came first, swift and sharp. Fear followed, quiet but unmistakable. Then, as firefighters do with the rising edge of panic, I converted it into action. Evaluate. Don't react. Chun and Ravensworth's office was a repurposed brick warehouse that still carried the smell of old machine grease in its walls. I arrived early. Habit, not anxiety, and waited in the quiet hum of their reception area until Chin stepped out to greet me. Daniel, he said, extending a steady hand. Let's get ahead of this. His office felt like a place where precision lived, edges neat, air filtered, silence intentional. I placed the binder on his desk, and he flipped through it with the same assessing calm Ruiz used before a high-stakes drill. You've prepared like a man who understands the terrain, he said. That helps. He read the medical summaries, the academy logs, Ruiz's affidavit. When he reached Hollister's text, he frowned. This isn't a wellness check. It's preconditioning. She's framing concern while positioning herself as an authority. Courts eat this language alive. He didn't say the part we were both thinking. It creates a narrative before you've even opened your mouth. Chun drafted 3 legal documents with practiced efficiency. As he explained each, I absorbed the implications not through panic, but through the tactical filter I'd used my entire career. Secure the perimeter. Know your exits. Control your oxygen. When he finished, he slid the papers toward me. These won't stop tomorrow's ambush, he said, but they'll force unusual scrutiny if they pursue guardianship afterward. That buys us leverage. I didn't repeat the stakes aloud. I didn't need to. I signed. The pen felt like a piece of equipment, something used to cut through smoke. On the way back, I noticed a blue sedan behind me through the rearview mirror. It wasn't tailing me aggressively. It stayed 2 car lengths back, but slowed when I slowed. And at the 4-way stop its driver leaned slightly forward, as if checking something on their dash. It could have been coincidence, but the driver's silhouette shifted just enough to register as intent. I turned onto my street. The sedan continued straight. My pulse steadied, but my awareness didn't drop. Secure the perimeter, Daniel. Always know who's behind you. The envelope at my front door had no return address. Inside were the pamphlets, Oak Valley, Sunrise Crest, Blue Haven. Same ones from the email thread, but now bearing subtle signs of handling. A small corner folded, a faint fingerprint smudge on the Sunrise Crest cover, a tiny pin circle around Intake Step 1. Not random, not mailed by accident. Touched, curated, presented. The 3 brochures, fanned neatly in my hands, felt like a premonition laid on my doorstep. My breath hitched, just once. Then I placed them into the evidence section of the binder. The envelope at my front door had no return address. Inside were the pamphlets, Oak Valley, Sunrise Crest, Blue Haven. Same ones from the email thread, but now bearing subtle signs of handling. A small corner folded, a faint fingerprint smudge on the Sunrise Crest cover, a tiny pin circle around Intake Step 1. Not random, not mailed by accident. Touched, curated, presented. The 3 brochures, fanned neatly in my hands, felt like a premonition laid on my doorstep. My breath hitched, just once. Then I placed them into the evidence section of the binder. Night dropped quickly over Brookhaven Ridge, heavy and anticipatory. As I set the binder on the table, the loose western gutter clanged, a sharp metallic knock that echoed like a false alarm. The kind you hear during drills before the real fire breaks. The house felt like it was bracing with me. Tomorrow wasn't the confrontation. Tomorrow was the ignition point. I placed my hand on the binder and whispered, "They've written a version of me. Tomorrow, they meet the one they forgot still exists." Thursday morning arrived like a held breath. The house was quiet, too quiet, the kind of quiet that used to precede a call-out at the station. I moved through the kitchen automatically, filling the coffee machine, then paused, realizing I couldn't recall whether I'd filled the water already. The machine hummed, full and bubbling. A momentary blank spot. If anyone else had seen it, Lydia, Evan, Hollister, they'd have framed it as decline. But I know the difference between memory loss and stress drift. This was the latter, pure and simple. Still, the moment lodged like a thorn. Tomorrow, even one hesitation could be used against me. At 9:12 a.m., a text arrived. "Mr. Mercer, I attempted to reach you yesterday. Please confirm availability for a brief conversation today. It will be helpful for all involved." Colleen Hollister. Help all involved was professional predation. She was using clinical neutrality as a crowbar, prying at my calm. I typed, "No evaluation or discussion without counsel present." As previously stated. Instantly, Reed appeared. But she didn't reply for nearly a full minute. A pause that wasn't hesitation, it was strategy. She was monitoring, not simply messaging. Finally, noted, cold, surgical, purposeful. By late morning, I realized no one from my family had reached out. Not Lydia with her daily check-ins. Not Evan with his faux casual follow-ups. Nothing. Silence is a tactic. Silence is a leash. When you expect noise and get quiet instead, it's because someone is waiting for you to slip. At 11:27 a.m., the silence broke. Not with warmth, but with intent. Mark. "Hello, Daniel. We want to ensure tomorrow feels safe and supportive for you. It's important you come with openness so we can guide you toward what's best." Every word was varnished with professional kindness. The kind you hear right before someone signs away a decision they don't understand. No emojis. No familiar tone. Just sanitized condescension. Hollister's fingerprints all over it. I spent the afternoon preparing the way a firefighter does before a major operation, quietly, methodically, without theatrics. I opened my binder. Checked the sequence again. Medical baselines. Ruiz's affidavit. Volunteer logs. Timestamps. The emails. Then I took out my notebook and wrote questions they will use to frame me. I listed them, each a trap disguised as concern. Have you been lonely? Weaponizes grief. Do you feel overwhelmed? Weaponizes widowhood and responsibility. Have you forgotten anything lately? Weaponizes normal human error. Do you worry you're declining? Weaponizes fear itself. I practiced answering each with the same deliberate calm I used briefing rookies before entering a live burn. Control your air. Control the room. Do not let their fire dictate your movement. This wasn't paranoia. This was preparedness. At 3:04 p.m., my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. "Mr. Mercer," a woman said without greeting. "This is Colleen Hollister. I will see you tomorrow." Not "I hope to." Not "I'd like to schedule." "I will see you." Claiming the outcome before it happened. Textbook evaluator dominance. "I'll be where my family asked me to be," I said, voice level. "But any evaluation without my attorney is unlawful." There was a silence, not of confusion, but recalculation. "Understood," she said, and hung up first. At 5:02 p.m., my phone buzzed again, a name I didn't expect. Marla. My sister. "Daniel, I spoke to Lydia today. She kept repeating that you haven't been quite yourself, and that she's concerned about your clarity. She asked if I'd noticed any confusion. I told her no. What is happening?" There it was. The script being tested on extended family. Not quite himself. Concerned about clarity. Straight from Hollister's playbook. I replied, "I'm fine. Please don't agree to anything. I'll explain later." The circle of their narrative was widening, and Marla had just confirmed the language they were practicing. As twilight crept across the floorboards, I felt that old pre-operation tension, The stillness before the first alarm bell. The quiet that was too clean, too controlled. The kind of quiet that always meant something big waited on the other side. I double-checked the door lock. Not because I forgot, but because tonight wasn't a night to assume. The western gutter rattled, a soft metallic quake that sounded like a drill siren warming up. A false alarm before the real one. I placed my hand on the binder, my fireproof suit, my oxygen tank, my exit strategy, and whispered to the empty house. They think I'm already fading. But tomorrow, they meet the man I used to be. The man who walks through flames. Friday smelled like copper and ozone, like the moment before a spark hits oxygen. That metallic tang slid across my tongue and set the old triggers alive in my chest. Adrenaline, focus, a thin wire of heat that told me the room was about to change temperature. I dressed slow. Clean shirt. No hurry. Pack the binder. Check tabs twice. Control your timing, I thought. If they expect a shaken old man, give them anything but. I walked up Lydia's steps on purpose. Took 12 minutes instead of 10. She opened the door before I knocked. "Dad?" she said, smiling the practiced smile of someone waiting to take on a role. Her eyes flicked to Hollister for a quick read, a tiny dart toward the evaluator before she spoke. I noticed that. I noticed everything. Inside, they'd drawn the room like a courtroom. Chairs in a tight semicircle. A narrow path leading to the center chair. A tissue box at exactly where the broken man should sit, soft, white, and strategic. Evan's hands tightened in his lap. His fingers betrayed him with a tremor that was not grief, but nerves. Mark hovered by the wall, chest rigid, inhaling a breath before lines he'd been taught to deliver. Hollister sat in the center seat, posture immaculate, shoulders squared, hands folded. Her eyes were bright in a way that never reached empathy. She chose her blinks like punctuation. Her cadence was too slow, too deliberate, designed to lull and then to land an expert pronouncement. "Mr. Mercer," she said, clinical and neutral. "Thank you for joining us." She didn't call me Daniel. Not once. That small omission taught the room how to think of me. File, case, subject. I didn't sit. I stood in the doorway long enough to watch the set tighten around me. Lydia gestured to the center. "Dad, please sit. We just want to talk. We want to help." "Control your response," I told myself. Let the script overreach. I stepped forward and let my voice stay even but hard-edged. "This is a hearing, not a conversation." Evan leaned in, voice modulated like a child reading a cue. "We're worried about you. You haven't been yourself." When Evan said it, his eyes darted to Lydia for reassurance. Small tells like that are louder than accusations. "Be specific," I said. The room lost a degree of momentum. Mark's jaw flexed. His inhale came a fraction too late. He opened the small notebook he'd brought. His hands trembled, and searched for an entry that wasn't there. Hollister's smile didn't change, but a thin line ran across her face when I spoke. She did not immediately answer. Her slow cadence faltered, an almost imperceptible hiccup as she recalculated. "Mr. Mercer," she began again, smoother now. Memory changes can be subtle. "My role is to help identify any areas of concern so that your family can make safe decisions." "Safe for whom?" I asked, the heat under my words controlled but unmistakable. Hollister's blink was too slow. She had assumed the role of expert. She had not accounted for the person she was evaluating being fluent in cross-examination. Mark read from his page, voice carefully even. "You've been forgetting conversations." He tried to sound matter-of-fact. His hand lifted to point to a bulleted line, but the line was blank when his eyes scanned it. Evan's face collapsed inward like a wave receding. Lydia began to manufacture an example, then stopped mid-sentence, the sound of a rehearsed line unraveling on her tongue. They had rehearsed the shape of grief, but not the substance. They had the architecture of an allegation without the bricks. That was when I made my move. I pulled a chair, not the center chair, and set it beside Hollister's, shoulder to shoulder. I sat down on the edge, so my body angled toward the family, but physically sharing her space. The small action changed everything. The geometry of authority snapped. Clinical distance is where evaluators live. Proximity is where witnesses sit. I removed the white coat from the equation. Hollister's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. She looked at me then, not the way an expert looks at a subject, but the way a clinician looks at a case that has begun to bleed contradictions. "Before we proceed," I said, voice low and contained, Did any of you read the notice my attorney filed this morning? The room folded inward. Lydia's face went pale like someone who'd been told the stage directions had been changed. Evan recoiled as if struck. Mark's hand slid down the notebook as if he'd forgotten how to hold the script. Hollister's smile thinned. We were operating in good faith. Then cite one instance, I interrupted. Name a date, a place, a person who witnessed this supposed decline. Silence. Hollister's slow cadence had nothing to anchor it to. She looked to Lydia, then to Mark, hoping a rehearsed shard would gleam. There was nothing. They had built a story from selective phrases and professional euphemisms. They had not built evidence. I set my binder on my knee and opened it. Not to prove anything yet, just to show I had prepared to do so. The sight of Ruiz's affidavit and Dr. Farley's notes is anatomical in its effect on a staged script. You've been practicing the language, I said softly, the heat under my words threatening now to become a cut. You've rehearsed concern and support until the words lost meaning. Who coached you? Who suggested the phrasing? Hollister found her voice, but it was thin. We consulted to identify. You consulted who? I demanded. Say the name. Lydia stammered. Hollister's professional mask slid the width of a breath. Tom Bennett's advice about evidence and timing felt true in my bones. Once you break a script with truth, the scaffolding collapses. They wanted a patient. They'd invited a witness. They'd written a version of my decline. They were about to meet the evidence of my clarity. For a moment, just a heartbeat, I felt the loneliness of standing in that room. 3 of them, one of me. And in that breath of quiet, Elena's face flickered into my mind. The way she used to tilt her head when she knew I was bracing myself for something difficult. You don't have to face everything alone, Danny. She would have stood beside me today. That small ache tightened my chest. And then I put it away. Focus. Breathe. Contain the fire. When I lifted my head, the heat inside me had hardened into clarity. The room was silent. Heavy. Expectant. I closed the binder with a soft click that sounded like a judge striking a gavel. Before we go any further, I said, each of you needs to explain why you decided I was incompetent. Controlled heat. Not raised volume. Just sharpened precision. Lydia blinked too fast, her eyes flicking toward Hollister for permission before she spoke. Dad, we're not saying that. We're just worried. Then say what you're actually worried about. I replied, not unkindly. Her fingers curled around the armrest, white-knuckled. Not grief, control slipping. Evan leaned forward, shrinking into himself. You haven't seemed like yourself, he murmured, voice small. His knee bounced. Fear, not concern. Fear of being wrong. Fear of what Lydia told him to believe. What part of me didn't seem like myself? I asked. He opened his mouth, then closed it. His eyes darted sideways to his sister again. The choreography betrayed them more than their words. Mark cleared his throat and stepped in, posture stiff, as if he'd rehearsed in a mirror. Daniel, this isn't about blame. It's about safety. We're trying to create a supportive path forward. A supportive path, straight from Hollister's lexicon. But his hand, his reliable, confident hand, tightened around his notebook until the paper bent. He was scared of what he'd started, of what it meant. Hollister straightened, reclaiming her authority. But her cadence slipped, barely perceptible, a too long pause before her first word. Mr. Mercer, she said, changes in cognitive function can be subtle. I'm here to help your family identify what supports may be appropriate. Her clipboard shifted on her lap. She caught it quickly, but the tell was there, her fingers gripping the edge too tightly. She had misjudged the room's temperature, and she felt it now. I turned slightly toward her. And you formed these opinions without evaluating me. A blink. Too slow. A beat of panic behind the eyes. I am simply responding to their concerns, she said, but her volume had softened, a professional losing altitude. Lydia's breath trembled. Dad, please don't make this harder. Harder, I repeated. You don't think deciding someone's future in secret is hard? You don't think reading about imaginary incidents you invented was hard? Her shoulders collapsed inward, her earlier poise dissolving. She reached for the tissue box without thinking this time. Genuine grief, not performance. We thought we were doing the right thing, she whispered. You've been so alone since Mom. Alone, I said softly, is not the same as incapable. A tear slid down her cheek. Authentic. Raw. Her first real moment of the day. I shifted my attention back to the group. You all built a narrative, but you never brought me into the conversation. You talked about me, not to me. Evan's face collapsed. A small, guilty inhale. Mark's eyes flicked toward the door, fight or flight instinct. Hollister pressed her thumb into her clipboard as if anchoring herself. I opened my binder. Not fully, just enough to show the papers. Ruiz's affidavit. Dr. Farley's baselines. Legal notices with Chen's signature. Yesterday morning, I said, letting each word land. My attorney filed protections. Any guardianship action based on these false claims will be challenged and exposed. The room reacted like I'd pulled the oxygen out of it. Lydia's breath caught. Evan stared at the floor. Mark's jaw sagged. And Hollister's throat bobbed with a single, involuntary swallow. This was no longer an intervention. It was a reckoning. I rose from the chair beside her, deliberate, steady. Dad, Lydia whispered, voice stripped of its practiced tone. What do we even do now? A long silence followed. A silence with weight. Hollister checked her watch. Fast, tense. A gesture she hadn't intended to reveal. Someone else was expecting a report. Someone above her. A system, not just a person. Her voice, when she spoke, carried none of its earlier certainty. You let him go. I walked to the door. Not triumphant, resolved. Not unscathed, clarified. At the threshold, I turned back, let my eyes settle on each of them, and spoke with quiet finality. You didn't lose me to decline. You almost lost me to your assumptions. I stepped outside into the clean, cold air, lungs open, spine straight, heart steady. Behind me, I left their collapsed script. Ahead of me, I carried my truth. The fire hadn't taken me. I had walked through it, and come out the one still holding the light.